So long as a tree is worth more dead than alive and a whale is worth more dead than alive, then so too will humans be worth more distracted, polarized, narcissistic, and infighting than we will as beautiful, functional human beings and communities.
This is The Rip Current. I'm Jake Ward. We look at the big invisible forces pulling on us. Forces so powerful we don't even really know they're working on us. And you and I have probably both been in conversations recently where we've begun to try to think about the future of AI, what it's going to do to us. And there's the obvious stuff, right? The stuff that you could come up with a couple of beers in you, the stuff that I would put out there about, job loss or, difficulty making friends with people if we're just, making friends with AI. Well, this guest, Aza Raskin, is someone I've known for a long time. And he, once upon a time, was a kind of plucky young builder. He was a real sort of optimistic guy. And then he and I sort of connected over our shared worries about the implications of what was being built. He went on to partner up with his longtime friend Tristan Harris on The Social Dilemma, the documentary that kind of put the problems with social media into everybody's brains. And then he created something called the Center for Humane Technology with Harris, which looks now mostly at AI. And when you talk to this guy, as you're about to hear, he gets way beyond the obvious catastrophic risks of AI and into stuff that we hadn't really thought about before now. Things having to do with surveillance, things having to do with the sort of wiping out of the ability to protest back against corporations and even against governments. Some really scary stuff. He's also got some very optimistic stuff, and he does very beautiful work using AI to decode the language of nature. That part's pretty cool. That comes up at the end. But this conversation, I think, will open your eyes, as it has to mine, to some of the big risks that we pose right now and the sort of cultish enthusiasm for AI that could, drag us in the wrong direction. So I hope you really enjoy and learn a lot from this hour-long conversation with Aza Raskin. I want to start with the story of you and I first meeting. So do you remember we went on a trip to Vegas together?
Yeah.
Do you remember this at all? Can you tell us, can you tell people anything you remember about that?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start by saying I only remember it vaguely, but not for the reason that most people think. It's just, it's a long time ago.
Right.
If my memory is that was a group of Silicon Valley-esque folks. I think Justin Kahn from Twitch and Steve from Reddit was there. But I don't even remember what the pretense was. So why did they bring us there?
This is the pretense. Here's the pretense that makes this so perfect for setting up the conversation we're about to have.
Okay.
It was casinos that had, now they didn't say it on the invite, but it was casinos had hired this guy, I don't remember his name, to put together a group of like you say, Silicon Valley people.
Yeah.
That I think these casinos that they brought out to Vegas to show you guys a good time. And I think the idea was that they were going to try and turn you guys into gamblers. That you guys were going to be whales, and I was hired as like like entertainment. I was like the hype man. I was between jobs. And this guy said, would you like to come and like hang with these folks? And I went, and I was supposed to just literally be like the guy you hire at the bar mitzvah to keep people dancing. It was that sort of idea. And so I was just sort of conversation guy. I think I did one presentation or something.
Yeah, that's right.
And otherwise, like, we just hung out, and that's how you and I came to be friends. But I think the irony that you, of all people, right, who have now gone on to this, to being known as an advocate and activist around the addictive potential of technology and what it does to behavior and and that you were the target of casinos thinking you'd be some kind of like high roller. It was pretty funny. There were a couple of those guys that I remember being pretty high rollers who were actually happy to gamble. That's right. But you had no interest in that, as I recall.
No, I remember the thing that I had interest in, now that you bring it up, was discovering that if you wander around casinos late at night, they are changing the portraits. So, there are big like wall art in the casinos. And I found some essentially construction workers like moving them to different locations. Oh. And I asked them like why, and it turns out that they didn't know. They just like, well, we just have to do this every couple of nights. But the real reason why is because they were changing the cues of where you knew where you were. so that people became more lost.
To disorient us.
Exactly.
Wow,
Which,
right.
That's sort of a kind of revisionist history for space. And now, of course, it's not just that AI is going to be creating individual pieces of deepfake news or content. It's that you can rewrite the entire history of humanity and the internet and create entirely deep fake realities.
Sure.
And I think that's a good bridge to what it felt like to wander around at 3 a.m. at a casino and realize they do the same thing to make us more susceptible.
I can't tell you how often I come back to casino design and casino, psychology in the work that I do. And that is so interesting because, right, of course, disorienting you, pumping oxygen into those places, which, keep you going, all of this kind of like this artificial environment to keep you as susceptible as possible.
Exactly.
That is really interesting.
Casinos are sort of now famous for the very first time on site or, but in seat metrics. It didn't come from Silicon Valley. It came from casinos. And what they discovered is they optimize for money, but not time in seat. That ended up being less effective than optimizing for time in seat. And it was, daily active users, minute active users, that kind of thing. And there's a whole art that casinos discovered of how to create a zone in which you just fall into a trance-like state. And those, of course, are very similar to the trance-like states that apps have also independently discovered.
Before we leave casinos, I had a conversation once with a security guy at a casino, and he's told me that, and this was long ago. This is before anybody was talking about facial recognition or anything else. And he said, "Oh yeah, we have these really sophisticated facial recognition systems for wanted posters." And I was like, "Why do you need that?" And he's like, "Well, the weird thing is when people break out of prison, one of the things they like to do is come to casinos." He's like, "It happens all the time." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, they come to casinos. I don't know, they're feeling lucky or something." And the policy in the casino that this guy worked at was, we don't mess with them while they're inside. Feel free. You want to spend money? You want to wander around and blow some of the money and in your few hours of freedom before we catch you? Go for it. And they don't want to disturb the other patrons. And then he said that they have these grab teams that are ready to go. And the second you breathe air, you go outside and breathe Nevada air, you are a couple dudes in Hawaiian shirts, hood you, and you disappear into a van, and the party never stops. Nobody ever gets to know that you weren't, that you were even in there.
Wow.
But I remember thinking, this is a place that knows how to keep making money. This is that's what they do. So,
well, that gives me goosebumps.
I know, isn't that crazy? Yeah. So, okay, so you let's give people some biography on you, because I you and I met at that thing, and then over the years we've just known each other in many ways, and you were at that time somebody who was a maker. You are still that person. You make things.
Yeah.
And you were playing around with kind of the edge of what's not in a destructive way, but just in a more of a trying to warn the public way, like what's acceptable, what's okay. And I remember one of the first things that we did together was sort of you as a source and me as a journalist was you had created this little homegrown system whereby you could take a photograph of somebody's key on their key ring and then 3D print a working facsimile off it. All you needed was that. And we put that on Al Jazeera, and you showed me how that worked. And I remember thinking, this is a guy who's got all of that ship it, instinct that builders are trained to have and rewarded for having in Silicon Valley. But you were clearly like grappling with, but what are we making here exactly? And what's okay with that? And I wonder if you want to tell us, maybe Infinite Scroll is one way to talk about this, right? You were the creator of that idea. Maybe that's a way to get into this a little bit, but I want to talk about this tension between making things and realizing that there's some implications to what you have made and how you got to that place.
Yeah, this really gets to the heart of the distinction between intelligence and wisdom. And that what is intelligence? Well, many ways to define it, but intelligence is roughly a measure of how efficiently and the number of ways you can get to a goal. It's just, and so that's a can, and a wisdom is okay, but should you do those things? what is the thing you're optimizing for? Is that the right thing? And the way I grew up, I think we're all sort of the merger of the river of our parents. And, my mother is a nurse practitioner, and she's done palliative care and hospice for many, many years. So she's there giving a very tactile, tangible sense of care at, the most profound transition in people's lives. And my father created the Macintosh project at Apple. And so that's a very different kind of care. It's a care at scale. And I think growing up in those two kinds of waters means there's a way of not just asking, like, should or can you do something, but should you do something? Mm-hmm. And that really came home to me when I invented Infinite Scroll. And actually, that's a little wrong, because it wasn't when I invented Infinite Scroll that message came home. When I invented Infinite Scroll, that thing, everyone's phone.
Define that for us. What is that?
Yeah. It's just, everyone's familiar with it if you're on Facebook or Twitter or X, whatever it is now, or TikTok. And if you just keep scrolling, more content loads. And that didn't used to be the case. I invented this thing in 2006. And it came from a very pure thought, actually, which was, if the user has scrolled and they haven't found what they're looking for, just load more. So I invented it before social media. Mm-hmm. And it was really meant to help people be more efficient. And what I was blind to is that technology was going to get picked up by a set of incentives later on. Social media, back to the casino thing, getting people to sit longer in their feed means they make more money, means they outcompete their rivals. That was going to get used and sucked away the machine to waste something like, I always forget the exact calculation, but it's on the order of 500,000 human lifetimes every month.
Mm. Wow, you did that math and realized this is what I have cost humanity through this.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that really set up the case for, like, well, why did my father make the Macintosh? And the reason why he built the Macintosh is that he wanted to extend the parts of ourselves as humans that are the most beautiful, right? In the same way that a cello extends our ability to make music, or a pen extends our ability to make art, a computer should extend the parts of us that are extra human. And or a computer can force us to live in a domain which is inhumane or harmful to us. And so it gets to the heart of, like, what is technology for? And there's a beautiful thing I learned from my father about the relationship between ergonomics and externalities. And what are ergonomics? Ergonomics is the study of how the human body bends and folds. Like, chair designers need to understand the ergonomics of your body. Otherwise, they create chairs that cause all sorts of health problems later on. Those are externalities. Externalities are essentially unintended or unconsidered negative consequences. And to the extent you don't understand the ergonomics of the body, you create externalities in the body. But that's true across every domain, right? Mm-hmm. If you do not understand how human relationships bend and fold, you create systems like Facebook that replaces beautiful connection with a false, brittle sense of connection with, with a like, or Snapchat replacing the sense of what friendship means with a streak. And then kids are addicted to keeping up their streaks and don't want to go on vacations, or their phones don't work with their family because they'll lose the streak. It's a Indiana Jones swap for something that is human and humane to something which is brittle and exploitable. But that goes all the way up to, our biosphere. If we don't understand how the ergonomics of a biosphere, how it bends and folds, then our geopolitical economic system will be ignorant of that and then have massive externalities. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're at the boundaries of 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, and we're deep in a biodiversity crisis. And so there's something to be learned from, I think, understanding how the Macintosh was made that applies everywhere.
That's so interesting. And do you think, for you, if you hadn't had your dad, Jeff Raskin's example, or your mom thinking about the important stuff, how do you think you might have progressed. I mean, I like to think, right, that your brain is such that you would just have found your way to this moment anyway. But like, just thinking about what the incentive structure was for young builders at that time and how we can understand this. I remember, when I was interviewing at NBC News to get in there, the one of the people that I interviewed with asked me, why are all these, as an older person not in Silicon Valley, who said, why are all these young people so convinced they are improving the world when they are so really doing damage to the world?
Yeah.
And that was sort of one of the guiding questions of the covers that we wound up doing. And I wonder what your answer is to that. How do people get to this place of thinking, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm making good stuff. This is the right job for me, while in fact, inadvertently, or maybe sometimes even on purpose, creating things that can do such harm.
There's the old quip, which is, when I was young, I always wanted to be someone. And when I got older, I realized I should have been more specific. And I feel like the same thing's true of Silicon Valley, where every startup says, oh, I want to change the world. And then we realize they should have been a lot more specific.
Yeah.
The system selects for, VC money selects for those things that can grow really fast, right? Every time you raise a VC round, you want to be at least increasing your valuation by 10x or more. So there are only certain things that can grow in such a viral way. And the question we need to stop and ask is, well, things that grow virally, maybe there's something of a virus in them, that they're not super healthful. And in fact, a great way of asking the question, what is the health of a society? An answer is, well, it's inversely correlated to its number of addictions. And things that grow very quickly often are going to prey on human vulnerability or limits or weakness that creates various kinds of addiction. The Upton Sinclair line is often in my mind when I talk to other people in Silicon Valley, which is, you cannot get a man to see that which his salary depends on him not seeing.
And that has been your experience. When you speak to people about this stuff, they don't want to engage with you in the way you would prefer.
Yeah, that's right. And it's often not because they're bad people or evil people.
Right.
It's just, there's no incentive. You don't get rewarded generally for looking at how your technology or your invention will get picked up by, the forces at play, power systems, competitive dynamics, and geopolitics, to be used to for abuse. Like, that's just not in your docket. And in fact, it was really hard for me to leave I'm just building startups, because I had honed a tool. I was good at designing. I was good at creating companies, good at raising money. But then the scale of the problems that we actually need to solve in the world are not conducive to the hammer, which is a startup. Right? Like, you can't really build another social media company to solve the attention economy. You have to use some other mechanism, and that's non-obvious, and it's depressing, honestly, to have to put down your tools and go wander in the desert to figure out what are other tools that you can find.
Yeah. When we come back, we're going to talk about Aza, about what it was to wander the desert and how he then got together with Tristan Harris, created the Center for Humane Technology, and got on the path he's on now. Stay with us. I remember talking to a defense contractor once and asking the head of that company, hey, so it was Palmer Luckey, who you brought me. And I said to him, well, he has this company, Anduril, for anybody who doesn't know. It's one of the other Peter Thiel companies, cousin to Palantir. And I asked him, well, you've created these technologies that are going to necessitate all kinds of new morals. Like, we're going to need new morality and new moral calculations to go with the technology you've built. Do you think it's your responsibility to build the morals to go with the tech? And he, surprise, surprise, said, no, I don't believe that's my job. I think that is democracy's job. I just create the thing, and then society will figure out how it wants or doesn't want to use it. It's up to lawmakers and democracy to make that happen. And it seems to me clearly you took a moment came when you realized we need to do something other than just wait for democracy to do this. We can't just, we're not just going to keep, people can't just keep building and following the same incentive structures. And I'm wondering how for you did you take that set of values and turn it into now this organization, Center for Humane Technology, that you run?
Yeah. Well, Lucky Palmer is, it's such a disappointing view. It's a deep abdication of responsibility. And it's also the obvious view you would take